Totally Football Show today. Wednesday night drama from the Premier League. Arsenal at Wolves. Call it one bottle after another. To the Champions League, where Newcastle roll up to Baku and get smoking. And Inter become the latest team to get Bodo'd in the Arctic Circle. We talk hot Bodo in a roll. Anthony Gordon scoring 4 and much more besides, including this weekend's action in the league with the North London derby and much more besides. It's the Totally Football Show. Thursday, the 19th of February, it's Totally Football Show. And today, Charlie Eccleshare has returned. Lovely to see you again, Charlie.
Lovely to see you too.
Also back is Mark Carey. Hello, Mark. And with us is Natalie Gedra of Sky Sports.
Hi, James.
Hi, Natalie. Loads of football, almost as much football as there was curling. What did you all watch?
I double screened Wolves Arsenal and Bodo Inter, so I think I did pretty well actually.
What a double whammy. Natalie, what were you a goblin?
I double screened Arsenal and Club Brugge Atletico Madrid, which was also entertaining. Yeah.
6 goals.
Yeah.
Ooh. And Mark?
I was across Newcastle, Qarabag, and Olympiacos by Leverkusen, which was a pretty decent game, and did dual screen Arsenal where I
bet you did.
I find it so hard to double screen.
It is.
It is.
And you can end up feeling a little unsatisfied on both.
Yeah. So true.
Agree.
What's the trick, do you think, for not feeling like you've watched both and understood neither?
Probably just focusing on one.
Really? Yeah. That's simple.
I think it's a matter of expectations. You need to have one clear priority. Because if you want to get the best out of both, you're probably not going to get that.
I put the sound up on one.
Small that's
screen,
a good strategy.
And keep the big screen. I actually quite enjoy games with no sound anyway, but that's just me.
You?
Yeah. Do you know why? And here we're going off on a bit of tangent. There's loads of football to discuss, so I'll make this really brief. I find that if I watch a game without commentary, it forces me to concentrate on what's actually happening, as opposed to having someone spoon-feeding me. You wouldn't have that when you're watching a film or with any other experience, but with football, you get somebody explaining to you what you're watching, and it lulls me into this kind of supine kind of mental limbo. Whereas if I don't have that, I'm actually forced to go, and I still don't understand anything, to be clear, but at least it's my own confusion.
Well, you're speaking to a Brazilian who spent most of her life hearing goal. So for me, that's just crazy.
Yeah, can't have one without the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, loads to discuss. Champions League, Newcastle beating Qarabag 6-1 with Anthony Gordon scoring 4 goals. Bodo Glimt continuing their incredible run. They beat Inter 3-1. They've now beaten Man City, Atletico Madrid, and last year's runner-up in straight games. Atletico 3-3 with Club Brugge. Bayer Leverkusen, that was 2-0 away in Piraeus. Good result for them. And in the Premier League, it was top-of-the-table Arsenal against bottom-of-the-table Wolves. And guess what happened? Yeah, this is where we're going to begin. Stoppage time in Wolverhampton. Wolves have been trailing for 89 minutes, finding an equaliser against the once resolute Gunners' defence, a mix-up between Gabriel and David Raya. It means that Wolves have climbed to 10 points now. They're just 1 from Derby's historic total. The 2 points drop, though, by the Gunners could be huge. Man City are 5 points behind them, but they have a game in hand, and they will be hosting Arsenal at the Etihad in April. So if Man City win all their remaining games, they'll win the title. The same, of course, is true for Arsenal. One of those two clubs has a much better record in their final 12 games of the season. We'll come on to that in a second or two. But an Arsenal fan was writing on Wednesday night, we've just lost the title. What do you think, Charlie?
It had that feeling. It was really, really terrible.
Really?
And the thing that was really terrible about it was, in their own way, they were as terrible going 2-0 up as they were throwing away that lead. I mean, you'd look at this game. If you hadn't watched it, you'd think...
I didn't watch it.
Okay, so you'd look at it, and presumably you'd look at the score sheet and think, okay, they must have been pretty good to get to 2-0 and then capitulated to lose, to draw the game 2-2.
Because 5 minutes in, Saka's already scored, no?
Yeah, the reality is, nothing really happened. So Wolves scored their 2 goals. They didn't have a shot in between those 2 goals. They didn't really create anything. There was no siege. They didn't do a whole lot other than remain in the game. That sounds like I'm disparaging Wolves. I'm not. They were brilliant in terms of their commitment and all of that.
Right.
But Arsenal just did nothing. But even in that first, they scored after 5 minutes, and you think, okay, they're gonna, they've scored. The floodgates will open. They're playing statistically one of the worst teams in Premier League history. They just sort of walked around, no adventure, no pace, no, like so slow with their movements, no risks. I actually sent a message just before Arsenal went 2-0 up being like, they're playing terribly. I mean, this wasn't like it's terrible because of the result. The performance was terrible. There was nothing. And then they went 2-0 up and you're like, and they were, their goal to go 2-0 up kind of came out of nothing. Wolves had started the second half reasonably well. They didn't create anything, but they were sort of getting at Arsenal. And then Arsenal scored. And they have this weird habit, Arsenal, of conceding quite quickly after scoring. Happened last week against Brentford. And sure enough, it happened again. And they've also got this weird habit. They've conceded 7 goals in the league in 2026. 3 of them have been long-range, spectacular goals. 3 of them have been horrendous defensive gaffes. And we saw one of each yesterday for Wolves. But it did have that feeling of like, this can't go on. They can't keep playing like this. If they keep playing anything like this, there's just no way they'll win the league. They can't. This has to be a line in the sand. And to be fair to Arteta, he has done that before. They've kind of sunk and then regenerated. But it's really not looking good. Because I think it's been easy. Like I've pushed back on this on the show of the kind of psychological element. I think that's been overstated. And I don't know. It's hard to say what this was because it was a weird mixture of, were they nervous or were they complacent? It was hard to put your finger on it because on one hand they were like, obviously the goal they concede is Raya coming and making a gaff, and he made a very similar one to concede a last minute equaliser at Sunderland.
Was his fault, do you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
And he did it against Sunderland. Same thing. If you just let Gabriel head that, and he did it in that Sunderland game. Came out, gets involved when he doesn't need to. Like there's no Gabriel has the easiest header away. It's just a hopeful cross. And I think it does come from being slightly agitated and kind of almost wanting to get involved, wanting to do something.
Right.
And
this is in the 94th minute.
Yeah, I think they're. It's just that they showed a lot of the things that have been happening in bad moments for Arsenal during the season. When it's that type of occasion that people will point out and say, "See, I told you, they've been doing that." And also, there's the demoralizing factor that they dropped points against the bottom team at the table. So you had the feeling that they turned a corner after the Man United game. They have, Arsenal can perform in the level they did against Leeds, for example. They can face a very competitive opponent who was on form and have a great performance and just dominate. And then they beat Leeds, they beat Sunderland, and they drop points to Brentford. And it's not great, but it was a tough fixture. But Wolves, it's massively deflating.
I mean, statistically, the fact that no team top of the table had ever thrown away a 2-goal lead to a team, even in the bottom 3, let alone bottom,
Ever?
in Premier League history.
I'm sorry, really?
Yeah, according to Opta, who tend to know their stuff. I mean, that tells you how rare this is. I mean, honestly, when it went 2-0, and it, obviously it's strange that it did happen, but like this whole kind of bottling narrative, I think it's felt harsh in some ways because I don't think any of their 3 second place finishes were this. The first one, they were way ahead of schedule. No one thought they'd be in that title race, and they ended up with Rob Holding, and they just weren't good enough to win the league. The next year, they got 89 points, won 16, drew 1 out of last 18. They were just beaten by a better City team. That can happen. And then last year was all a bit mad with injuries and what have you.
Right.
But this would be, and it feels at the moment like, when you're a kid and your parents are a bit like, oh, I think you're a bit tired. And you're like, I'm not tired. Like, stop saying that to me. It feels like they're the child. And everyone's saying like, you're bottling it though, aren't you? We're not bottling it. And it feels like they kind of are. Like, how else? Like, but I think you're right. Like, you could explain away all of those other drop points. This is now 10 points from the last 21 available. That's 7 games. That's a reasonable sample size, and that's mid-table form.
Right.
But this did feel you just can't explain this away.
12 games remaining in the season. Sky helpfully put up a graphic post-game showing what these 2 clubs, Man City and Arsenal, the 2 title contenders, have done in the past 4 seasons over their last 12 games of the season. How well they finish the campaign. City, over the last 4 seasons, have picked up 30 points from 12, 31, 32, and 27. Last season. Arsenal have picked up 18, 21, 31 and 21 again. So no question, they're about a third better, City, in terms of points picked up on the run-in.
But you can argue, there is a strong argument that it's not the same Arsenal and it's not the same Man City. I think people are panicking also because it's Man City, but at the same time, it is a city that hasn't shown consistency, and it is a city in transition. It is a team in formation. I think there are a few fixtures that they have before they face each other on the weekend of the 18th and 19th of April that are going to be big for both of them, but also the fact that they are facing each other in the Carabao Cup final is massive, because if it's very symbolic that Arsenal has this chance to beat Manchester City and win silverware like against them, and I think that can be a massive boost if it goes the other way. I don't know. I see a lot of glass half full for Arsenal. I know it's difficult to see it right now, but it's not a given that Man City are not going to drop points.
Well, for example, this weekend when they take on Newcastle, although having said that, Newcastle, I think, have the worst record in terms of going to another club and not winning that we've ever seen in the Premier League. But
this is the thing, though. Newcastle have a really bad away form in the Premier League this season, but they've won 3 in all competitions. They've won 3 away games in succession. But then every team is taking points off each other. So this season is a really hard one to predict. So while the history of Arsenal and Manchester City
the history of the Arsenal
in previous seasons is a useful yardstick or proxy,
right,
it's really hard to then throw that forward to this season, because it feels for so many different reasons that this is an anomalous season.
Okay, if you're not as yet panicking on Arsenal's behalf, Natalie, what happens if they drop points this Sunday in the North London derby?
Yeah, that's so big. And in a way, it's good that it's away. It's an away game for Arsenal.
Because Spurs are rubbish at home?
No. But it's also the fact that I think it would be a very nervy Emirates, because we've seen it happening throughout the season, and it's absolutely natural. If I was an Arsenal fan, I would be nervy on the stands during this season, especially, because everyone's talking about how Arsenal, it's just they're just going to win the league. This time is happening, and you have all these recurring issues for Arsenal. So in a way, it is the perfect game for you to boost your morale, beat your main rival who just changed managers. It's not the smoothest time for Spurs, but they need to beat them.
I do think it not necessarily the away factor, but I do think the fact that it is this North London derby and it's its own kind of microclimate could be helpful in the sense that Sunday is not about the title race, really. I mean, it is obviously in a wider sense, but it's in that it's kind of that game has a kind of cup tie feel to it, that fixture. I wonder if that's sort of what they need, just to take a step out of this, what feels like quite suffocating pressure.
Here's the North London derby.
A little bit, but I feel like that, yes, it's pressure, but it's pressure in a different way. Whereas if that's like a home game against Brentford, I know they've just played, obviously that can't happen, but you know what I mean? That would feel incredibly stressful and tense. Whereas I think this, it's a different kind of tension. Okay. And look, a lot of people feel Spurs, like I know, from online anyway, the mood is very much like, what a time to be playing Arsenal. It feels like Arsenal are there for the taking for Spurs.
Right. Well, Natalie's suggesting that the fact that Spurs have just changed manager makes them maybe a good opponent, but I'm not so sure. Beyond the classic new manager bouts, Igor Tudor's got a terrific record in his first games when he comes in. I think he's won all of his first games in charge at his last 5 clubs. What's the Athletics' position tactically on what he will do with Spurs, how they will be different with him in charge?
Well, he's more likely to open up a little bit more. He's very big on being aggressive, out of possession, really pressing really high. We wrote a piece on this. I looked into his numbers, his last full season at Marseille, because he was manager at Lazio and of course Juventus recently, both coming in March. So to your point, he comes in late.
The Marseille one, I think, is the only full season he's had anywhere in maybe 6-7 clubs.
Yeah, so me being big on sample size, I had to go right back to the 22-23 season, and no team had a higher number of possessions won in the attacking third than Marseille in that season. So he likes to press high, but this is why I think it's interesting from the narrative perspective. You can sort of flip it either way. You can say against Arsenal, if they open up, really try and press aggressively, Arsenal could pick them off, because
Arsenal want that generally.
Yeah, exactly. Arsenal have struggled. They've done fairly well overall. They are at the top of the table. That they've done fairly well in breaking down low blocks overall, though it is a bit of a challenge for them. When teams come onto them and go toe-to-toe with them, Arsenal can pick them off. So if Spurs with Tudor are successful in pressing high, giving Arsenal a bit of a shock, and it's successful, then they might get a good result. But if they do it just with a bit of naivety or not enough time to really train those sort of patterns, then Arsenal could pick them off. So I'm really interested to see how this game plays out, because the narrative's almost perfectly set either way for whichever happens.
Also, he doesn't have a lot of players available.
Also true,
yeah. That is very, and I'm especially intrigued because he likes to play with a back three, and I don't know what he's going to do to set up. Ideally,
Romero's still suspended, of course.
yes, exactly, because ideally he has all these players to play in the system but he doesn't at the moment, and also, I mean, it's just, there's this mood around Spurs where they just need to win, and they need to get on board with this project, because they've been so, I don't know, so Thomas Frank has been under so much scrutiny.
Right.
And now with Tudor, is it going to be a mess? They need this first win to just, change the mood and change things around the club.
I don't know. I do feel that because it's Arsenal, they have such a terrible record, lost their last 3 at home to the Gunners, that maybe this is a bit of a playing with house money in the classic expression for Tudor. His first game in charge, if they were to get something, and we've seen Spurs players get themselves up, as it were, for matches like this, Man City recently, then what a boost that would be. They have had 12 days off.
Yeah.
Yes.
While Arsenal, by the time they face each other, will have played three fixtures,
times since Spurs last played.
which is going to be, I think, a factor. Both clubs defending 5-point margins, Arsenal over City in the title race, Spurs over the bottom 3, because that's all they've got now in terms of breathing space.
I also think this game would have taken quite a lot out of Arsenal physically, even though they tried to see, it felt like they were trying to conserve energy, but playing in and we should say, it was filthy conditions. It looked like that's a heavy pitch. I would say as well, just on, and covering Spurs for 5 years taught me this, like, you're really wary of making sort of reactionary sort of statements after a game, and you have to think, but is this just about this game, or is it about more? And I do think with Arsenal, it is about more. Like, this wasn't just about last night.
Right.
This is sustained, and that's what I think the concern is. This wasn't like a kind of freaky, how on earth have they drawn with Wolves? This was an extension, admittedly like the lowest point, but it was an extension of a continuation of this calendar year.
Something that almost happened when they played Wolves at the Emirates back in December. On the subject of Wolves, we shouldn't go without saluting at least the first goal, the Bueno to Bueno. Are they related at all?
Don't think so.
Right, so that was Hugo Bueno set up by Santi Bueno, and what a lovely finish.
Brilliant goal. Yeah. Really, really good goal out of nothing. And Hugo Bueno, had just played on Hincapié for the Arsenal goal.
Oh,
so
right.
Impressive bounce back.
Mateus Mane as well. I know that he's been in great form a lot this season, but he had a hand in both of the goals. He brought it down brilliantly. It was like a second phase from a set piece, wasn't it? The first one that Bueno scored, which is why he was on the right-hand side. And Mane brought it down excellently and then played it for Santi Bueno to set up Hugo Bueno. Too many Buenos. But then the second goal, the one that he crossed in, which sort of caused that chaos, it was almost like the reverse fixture as well, which he did similar for them to equalise. He just causes chaos. He drops a shoulder. He's got such quick feet. He's such an exciting young talent. If Wolves, it looks like Wolves are going to go down, if they can hold on to him, that would be excellent. But I don't think they will, because he's such a young talent.
Yeah, and also the merits to Rob Edwards, because if we're going to go down, we're going to go down fighting, and he created that atmosphere, that spirit.
So while Arsenal were drawing 2-2 in Wolverhampton, Newcastle, slightly earlier on Wednesday night, had been all the way in Azerbaijan. Was it 3,000 miles?
It's the longest distance an English club has gone in a European game, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It's a lot of miles.
A lot of miles. They went there and they scored a lot of goals, 6-1. 4 of them from Anthony Gordon in the first half. Newcastle's first half XG of 4.5, which they actually outscored. That was the highest recorded XG in the opening 45 minutes of a Champions League match ever. Anthony Gordon is only the second player in Champions League history to score 4 goals in the first half of a match. The other one being Luis Adriano of Shakhtar against Bate Borisov in 2014.
Yeah, remember him.
Yeah, nice. There you go. Well, it was a tennis score. It was an incredible first half. Who actually watched this one?
I
over it.
watched this one,
Right.
and it was frightening how poor the defending was. You
Yeah.
can give credit to Newcastle, and they pressed really high. Eddie Howe set up with a very mobile front three. Nick Voltemada was playing more as a number 10. Anthony Gordon was running right through the centre, which he has done more recently.
He
as
was
well.
more of a centre forward.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and he has been doing that the past couple of weeks as well. And I think he wants more intensity and mobility in the front line and pressing really well. But when you're up against a side of the, I think this is the thing. Charlie and I were speaking about this before. Against the side of the quality of Qarabag, then you're going to run riot. But then Qarabag have had some good results. And to Charlie's point earlier, you were saying to me this morning that actually the fact that they're in the playoffs suggests that they've done well enough to not sort of be in
Well,
the
they finished
scoreline.
22nd in the league phase.
Yeah,
But even so, but this is still
but
kind of
that's still
baffling.
better than-
yeah.
yeah.
And they
They
drew
beat-
with Chelsea.
They
Yeah.
beat Eintracht Frankfurt. They beat Benfica. They took points from Chelsea.
But I do not, based on this performance alone, you could never have guessed why or how that could have
First
been.
half
Yeah,
was disastrous.
This felt like watching the chances and things. It felt as if this was like their first game in the Champions League, and you were like, "Wow, these guys are out of their depth. Like this is scary. How has this happened?"
The thing for me was that everything was just going right through the centre, right through the between the centre backs. Where normally, if you're a team who's a bit more of a minnow, you'll maybe stay compact and force the opposition wide, and they still might get joy in the wide areas, and they still might break you down. But the fact it felt a little bit, and the cliches have already been said on commentary, a bit kind of under 12s, under 14s football, where they were just running straight through the heart of the pitch, and they had no answer to it, which was quite shocking.
But I guess what made it a perfect storm is if had this been a League Two, League One team in FA Cup tie, they wouldn't have played in such an open way.
Right.
They obviously would have put
Yes.
everyone behind the ball. This felt like a team who kind of believed they could go toe-to-toe with Newcastle, and I guess with some reason based on the fact they qualified for this stage, but were patently unqualified to do it.
Yeah, and there was a few which led to that with Newcastle's press, which again gives them credit. They were trying to play through the middle of the pitch. They even conceded, had a kickoff, tried to play it back to I think it was the midfielder at the time, and then Newcastle within about 15 seconds went and scored again. And that is when it is kind of school football, under 14s football. So there was that. But I mean, to your point, Charlie, as well, I looked into this of the Opta Power Rankings, which is essentially a proxy of team strength. And they do this globally. I looked at where Qarabag do fall within the global world rankings compared to English teams, for example. And they sit somewhere between Bristol City and Preston North End in terms of quality. But then combine that with the fact that they are still trying to go toe-to-toe with an established Premier League side, you're going to get picked off. So it was the perfect storm a little bit. Newcastle did play well, but Qarabag were shocking, really. Mateusz Kukalski, the goalkeeper, kept them in it, which is frightening to say. When it was 5-0 at half
played
time.
really well, didn't he? Like after Gordon, he's got to be man of the match, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he gave away a penalty, and he was still came out of the game with credit.
That double save at the end.
Excellent, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
from
The
Asula.
penalty he gave away, which was the second one that Anthony Gordon converted, there was a little bit of friction there with Kieran Trippier. Trippier, I think, speaking on behalf of other players, or at least that was Trippier's suggestion post-game.
Yeah, he was trying to do the sort of the captain's performance of, okay, you scored a hat-trick, now it's time to maybe give Nick Voltemada or someone a bit more confidence, be the team player. And Gordon was like, well, I'm the penalty taker.
Yeah, I think that's a really weird outlook on that. Like, I think it's borderline. Like, you could be accused of disrespect and lacking professionalism if you start like messing around with the penalty taker.
Yeah.
It's like it's a Champions League knockout tie.
Right.
If he's a taker, let him take
And
it.
he's got a brilliant record as well.
And he took them both
penalty.
really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was all laughs and jokes after. They did an interview together, which was quite nice, actually. I don't know whether it was the Newcastle media team or the manager saying, like, if you go together, we'll just completely nip this in the bud. Because there was suggestions during commentary that we'll ask them, what happened at the end of the game.
And talking about penalties, I know when you concede 6 goals, you can't really complain about a penalty. But the third goal, there was a penalty they conceded. I thought that was really harsh because the Qarabag's
handball.
defender, yes, exactly. Yeah. He was falling. He had his back to the ball as well. Like there was nothing he could have done to avoid that handball, and still it was given. So it's just that in that moment of the match when Newcastle was they were just hammering them, I just felt really bad because like you concede that penalty. I mean,
Newcastle's record on the road, which was infamously bad, is now actually looking pretty good. They had the 2-2 draw away at Paris Saint-Germain. That wasn't bad. They beat Aston Villa away. This 6-1 victory in Qarabag. They beat Spurs, asterisk, 2-1 before that. So, 3 straight wins on the road.
I mean, what it does do, I had in my head written off the City-Newcastle game on the weekend because 3 days after Qarabag, I just thought the distance travelled, they probably have had a tough European tie, City sandwiched in between the two legs wouldn't be the priority. The fact that this turned into basically a training game means maybe that match is in play for Newcastle.
Are you saying that the second leg against Qarabag is really not...
I would feel pretty confident.
Okay, Qarabag have recently visited England to take on a Premier League side.
And how did that go for them?
6-0 Liverpool.
Well, then it really could be a tennis. Could be a 6-1, 6-love.
If it were to be 6-0, that would make an aggregate score of 12-1, which would be the joint highest aggregate score ever in a Champions League tie. Happened once before in 2009 when Bayern Munich did Sporting 12-1 and then got knocked out by Barcelona in the next round. Funny enough, could be Barcelona who are waiting for Newcastle, assuming they do get through. You bring us on to Man City, though, Charlie. It is their fourth meeting of the season. They've got at least one more to come because they're going to be playing each other in the FA Cup too. The Magpies, I touched on this before, have never won a Premier League game at the Etihad in 20 previous visits. It is the most an away side has ever visited a stadium without securing a victory in Premier League history. And yet we feel that maybe this is the time?
No, I just think it means there's a chance, whereas I thought it would be a kind of zero chance.
Well, I mean, there's always a chance.
And also, I was at the second leg of the semi-final between them.
The Qarabag Cup.
Yes, at the Carabao Cup, yes. And I'm interested to see how Eddie Howe and Newcastle, they're going to address the problems they had, especially in the first half, because Reinders and Phil Foden, they were running the same channels in the middle over and over. And after the game, Eddie Howe said that the players just weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, but it was real. They just looked very open. They played 3 in the back at that game, which worked well for them in some occasions last season and this season as well. But they do need to address that. And also with Man City, we're talking about rest and Newcastle and the travel. Yes, with Man City. Not only they didn't play midweek, but they rested a lot of players in the FA Cup in the weekend, including Erling Haaland, who was very strained. So it is another factor on their side.
I do wonder whether Newcastle have found a bit more of a formula, which could be the undoing of Manchester City. If I'm going to give them a chance of just having that really pacey front line. So having Anthony Elanga on the right, Harvey Barnes on the left, and having Gordon, who's so good at pressing. He's such a pest in the best way possible. Out of possession, they can obviously finish. Even though he hasn't been as good in the Premier League this season compared to Europe, to have that threat in behind, to know that, especially with Manchester City's higher line than previous years, whether or not actually we maybe think twice about really going forward because we know that we could get hit in behind with maybe a direct ball, then maybe Newcastle will make them think twice at least compared to the previous game where I don't believe it was the 3 of them who started up front.
Yeah. And it's interesting with Voldemort as kind of a 10 because you take a little bit the pressure off him in terms of goals because everyone's been talking about that, but also like he's not as mobile as that front 3, but he can also be useful just holding up the ball in that previous line. So yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, 8:00 Saturday night, Man City hosting Newcastle, win that and they will be just 2 points behind the Gunners, who will be playing Sunday afternoon in the North London derby. What a week it's been in those Champions League playoff first legs. 34 goals scored across 8 matches. Lots of them, 7, came in Galatasaray's 5-2 victory over Juventus on Tuesday night. And then we had 4 in the big upset of Wednesday, which was Bodo Glimt beating Inter, last season's Champions League runners-up, 3-1, of course, in the Arctic Circle. Well, earlier this morning, I was joined by broadcaster and Bodo fan Martin Sliepnes of the Eccleshare podcast, and this is what he had to say. Martin, thank you so much for joining us again. How are you feeling?
Oh, wow. I'm flabbergasted. Last time we talked, Bodo Glimt had just beaten City. Since then, they beat Atleti away and now Inter at home. So I'm so gassed. It was hard to go to sleep yesterday, but we're only halfway there. That's the thing. Can't get too emotionally involved now.
Only halfway to the last 16 or halfway to something a bit further?
That's a good question. I think Glimt has now beaten Atleti and 2-2 against Dortmund and City and now Inter. It's like it's 4 of the 6 last finalists in the Champions League. They've manhandled. So how far can this go? I wouldn't dare to dream about anything more than surviving in Milano, but it's impressive.
It certainly is. Bodo Glimt took 2 points from the first 5 Champions League fixtures, didn't win any of the first 6, but have now become, with Wednesday's result, the first Norwegian team to win 3 Champions League games or European Cup matches in a row. In Norway, how do you explain that change?
It all comes down to the mentality of the team and the players. The manager, Kjetil Knutsen, said after the game yesterday, he said, first and foremost, I want to say, I don't think we played a top game today. We were sloppy with the ball. We were too sloppy towards our own identity. There were some fantastic goals, but we know we're playing a great team. And the good thing is that we're going to play them again. And I know how we can play better. So I think at every point, the team and Kjetil Knutsen and Glimt, they care about how they play, not the result. That's the main thing. And I am not result-oriented football. I think that allows them to be themselves and, have fun and enjoy everything they do on the pitch.
You were watching this in the company of about, 400 Bodo fans, yes?
Yeah, in Oslo, in a pub.
And as you put it, that's about 1% of the town's population.
Yeah. It's impossible to understand because we're a skiing country originally. It's snow here all the time in wintertime. But somehow, these players, they are able to do step overs and pass with both feet and just score incredible goals again and again.
Has this knocked Big Air and the Winter Olympics off the front pages, or back pages, rather, in Norway?
Yeah, it's in Norway, we have this is straight to the front page and the top of the front page. So Olympics, they can rest for a day. Yesterday and today is Glimt's time to shine.
Was there nervousness when Bodo found the equaliser, and Inter for a while looked a capable side? Was there much concern among those Bodo fans you were with, or by now are you just expecting to be able to impose your game?
It was kind of a weird, surreal experience to watch because it seemed like Inter didn't, they wasn't able to compete on the same level. They had 2 shots hit the post, so they were good. But they always was like 1 meter away from the Glimt players. The Glimt players always got to turn and pass to a better teammate. So it seemed like Inter wasn't up for the task. Didn't have the legs. Glimt had 3 weeks off and haven't had a game since the Atleti match, which is 2 weeks ago. So I think that someone should research this because this could be the way to play football.
Well, indeed. So people might mention that. A lot of people talk about the pitch as being a key factor in these results. But you mentioned the fact that Bodo Glimt have also, before this winning run, gone to Dortmund and at the Signal Iduna Park produced a 2-2 draw. Previous to this, they also went to the Civitas Metropolitano and beat Atletico Madrid at theirs. So it's not just about the pitch.
In Bodo, on a winter night, I think the pitch is a major factor because it seems to me, I played low leagues football right back, but I think it seems like the grass players that comes to play on artificial pitches, they can't turn quick enough, and the ball also travels faster. So I think the Juventus also played at Aspmyra in the group phase and won 3-2, I think. They adjusted better than Inter. In the second half against the Juventus, they kind of took the game and owned Bodo Glimt. But Inter never did that. They never was able to get on the level of the speed and pace of the game.
Well, you'll be back on grass, or rather Bodo Glimt will be back on grass for the return leg next Tuesday, and you're going to be there at San Siro.
Yeah, I'm traveling. Booked my flight yesterday. Can't stay in Oslo when possibly the greatest thing ever in my life are going to happen in Milano. So most definitely I'm going to be there with my knitted Bodo Glimt sweater.
Martin Sliepnes, who's living the dream. What a thing to have happen to your club. Look good for getting to the last 16, and then who knows, in the last 16, Should they get there, they'll be facing either Man City, who they've already beaten, or Sporting Club de Lisbon. Wow. And I'm wondering, the whole business of freshness, we talked about clubs who are playing midweek, Spurs in relation to their fixture, their paucity of fixtures compared to Arsenal. The fact that these are the only games that Bodo Glimt are playing, their domestic league doesn't start again until March. How much is that helping them in these games, as much as the infamous plastic pitch?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but they do. I mean, the way they're playing, I was so impressed with them yesterday. I have to say, though, the other time I saw them early in the season against Spurs, again, they actually ended up drawing, but they battered Spurs and played in a similarly inventive way. The passing patterns, the movement, the dummies, the runs off the ball. I mean, it's just sensational to watch.
Yeah, I totally agree with some of the technicality of the goals, the stepovers and the one-touch finishes as well. It was nice to see as well Jens Petter Hauge being happy to score against Milan, so Inter Milan specifically, as a former AC Milan player himself. But it's just, some of the finishes. And I don't know whether it maybe links with the pitch itself and almost trusting the touch, trusting the flick and knowing that it's going to maybe go a certain way. I don't know whether even implicitly that maybe has a factor. But I think it's a double-edged sword with not having competitive football, because if they didn't perform very well, you could say that they're maybe not match fit enough, and they've not quite got that conditioning, but they clearly have.
And I think that previous European seasons have helped them. That's the suggestion, that whereas before they didn't know exactly how to manage that time off, that now they are managing to keep the freshness but without losing their sharpness. Certainly that's how it looked Wednesday once again. As for Inter, it was a dreadful week for Serie A clubs in the Champions League. Atalanta got beaten 2-0 by Borussia Dortmund. Galatasaray going from 2-1 down against Juventus to 5-2 winners. And now this for the Nerazzurri. They did get some good news, though, Inter on Wednesday night, when their neighbours and closest title rivals, Milan, played Como in the game that they have in hand, and they only drew 1-1. This is Cesc Fabregas's Como. Como took the lead when Mike Maignan, the Milan keeper, basically passed the ball straight to the one player you don't want to pass the ball straight to, Nico Paz, who promptly stuck it in the net. They had an incredible equaliser, a ball hoofed up from way, way back. Someone to the back line of Milan just hoofs the ball way upfield. It bounces once, Leao catches hold of it, and then basically lobs the keeper, and it's 1-1. At this point, Como are pressing forward, and a bizarre thing happens. Salamakers is surrounded by, well, he's got a couple of Como players next to him, and he's by the touchline, right by where Cesc Fabregas is standing. And Fabregas basically reaches out as play is going on and either pushes him or grabs his shirt. Milan say he grabs his shirt. Salamakers turns around, even while players continue, goes, "What the hell?" And Fabregas admits, yes, I did something terrible. I will try. He says, I will try never to do this again, which is interesting. But you can imagine scenes basically after this, because then Max Allegri, the Milan manager, comes running over and there's a bit of a altercation. And the referee comes over and he shows the red card. But not to Fabregas. He sends Allegri off. Allegri, to be fair, has got a reputation. He's not the first time he's been sent off this season either. But then post-game, we have Fabregas saying, yes, I made a mistake. It was the heat of the moment. But when he leaves the press room, he bumps into Allegri, who starts shouting at him, "You are a child. You've only just started managing." So fabulous stuff. And the result is that Inter are still 7 points clear of Milan, with everyone having played the same number of games. Anyway, that was in Serie A. Elsewhere in the Champions League on Wednesday, Natalie, tell us all about this thrilling Club Brugge Atletico Madrid game.
It was exciting, because, Atletico Madrid, they've been so inconsistent this season. They had 2 wins in the last 6, but at the same time, they come off the back of a big win against Barcelona at the semi-final of Copa del Rey, and they had a strong start with a goal scored by Julian Alvarez from the penalty spot, with a handball. And then Club Brugge, they created really good chances. Oblak had a couple of good saves in the first half. And then at the end of the first half, Athletic scores from a corner with Ademola Lookman, who's been really good since he came into the club. They made a lot of signings in the January window. So then second half drama, because Club Brugge, they managed to score twice. They go back into the game. They're playing well. And then they concede a non-goal. And that's just, it's just heartbreaking for them. But in the minute 88, they scored a third. It was a very tight call. At first, it was ruled out by offside, but then the VAR reviewed, and it was a well-deserved point for them. They should get something from that match. And at the end, Simeone said that they lacked defensively, even though Athletic, they had chances to put the game to bed. And Koke said that it was kind of the sum up of what Athletic season's been, which is basically a roller coaster. So it's all open for the second game. Yeah.
Do you reckon Brugge could go to Atletico and get something?
They were very competitive. They can absolutely get something. And with Atleti, you really don't know what's going to happen this season. So, yeah.
Winner of that tie will be taking on either Spurs or Liverpool in the last 16. Mark, the other game played Wednesday night was Leverkusen's 2-0 victory away at Olympiacos. Sounds impressive.
Sounds impressive. I think they were probably just about deserving of the victory. It was actually quite a tight game. Really interesting first half, plenty of chance. I think Leverkusen probably edged the first half. There was some really excellent saves from Olympiacos goalkeeper Solakis, especially from an Ibrahim Massa shot. He just flicked it. It was one of those where you just thought your brain automatically goes to sort of the back of the net to think it's guaranteed to go, and he just flicked it over the bar. Ernest Poku had a really good chance. He's a really exciting young player for Leverkusen. Sort of plays just off the left hand side. He had a really clear 1v1 chance. They're one of those that you almost have too much time to think about it and didn't get it even close to being on target. Actually, it was a really terrible miss. But he's a really exciting player. Olympiacos had a really quite bad head collision between two of their players, which sort of halted the momentum of the game. Rightly so, it halted the game for quite some minutes, and the tension went out of the game for a little bit. But then they sort of rallied, and it actually made Leverkusen maybe take their eye off the ball ever so slightly, because Olympiacos scored at the end of the first half from a set piece, but Mehdi Taremi ended up being adjudged offside. So it was 0-0 at half-time, and then it was just two quick clinical finishes ultimately from Patrick Schick. So it took the first one really well in his stride, and it's just that moment of quality that you can tell among all the other chances that I mentioned before, where it's just, okay, with a quality finisher, that would have been a guaranteed goal. He was that guarantee of a goal, and then a couple of minutes later scored a really clinical header as well. So 2-0, deserving of it. Olympiacos could and probably should still have confidence that they can do okay in the second leg. They've beat Leverkusen 2-0 themselves already in the Champions League this season. So it's still, if not hangs in the balance, I still think it'll be a competitive game in the second leg.
Okay. Match day 27, so we've got a North London derby, Man City hosting Newcastle, Crystal Palace up against Wolves. What else? Well, there's no Saturday lunchtime game. 3 matches at 3 o'clock on Saturday, which are Villa Leeds, Brentford Brighton, and Chelsea Burnley at 5:30. West Ham take on Bournemouth. At 8, it's that Man City Newcastle game. 3 games Sunday at 2 o'clock, Palace Wolves, Sunderland Fulham, and Vitor Pereira's debut as Forest manager as they host Liverpool. At 4:30 then, you've got Igor Tudor's debut for Spurs. Oh, I should mention Vitor Pereira, it's his league debut because they're in action tonight as we record Thursday in the Europa League. But yeah, Igor Tudor making his debut for Spurs at 4:30 on Sunday in the North London derby. And then on Monday night, Everton take on Man United. Forest and West Ham, the two teams on either side of the dotted line. West Ham hosting Bournemouth, and Forest up against Liverpool, who they beat 3-0 at Anfield back in November. Now, new man in charge for Forest.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because with the new manager, you always get the factor, it's there's a new guy around, it changes the mood.
Bouncy.
When it's the fourth guy, I mean, I just wonder if... Yes, exactly. It's like, okay, there's a new guy again, Does it have any kind of effect? We don't know.
Well, do you know what? Maybe this one will, because the other ones haven't. Dyche, Ange Postecoglou, Nuno, and Steve Cooper, they all lost their first Premier League games in charge of Forest.
And even to prepare a game against Forest from a Liverpool perspective, how are they going to play?
Well,
Because
that's a plus then for Forest as they.
it is.
Yeah.
It is a plus for Forest, definitely. Because even looking at Vitor Pereira, he played different shapes at Wolves and he used different players. And lately in his final matches for Wolves, he was changing too many things. So, yeah, I really don't know what to expect from Forest against Liverpool, really.
Okay.
From a Liverpool perspective, using the Fenerbahce game from Thursday night might be the best way to actually see how they can break them down. Without that game, it might be.
But it's a
more
small
indecision.
sample size, Matt, Mark. That would kill
Very
you,
small
surely.
sample size. Maybe they shouldn't look in the data, but video and tape alone, it could be quite useful to see that. I think with Vitor Pereira as well, he came in, I think in December when he came in at Wolves and had a bit more time to kind of get them from a really terrible position when he first came in there. Obviously now it's February, mid-February. Do you think maybe there's not as much time to really kind of turn the tide in the same way? Of course, they're not in the relegation zone at the moment, but he's got less opportunity to get them playing, should we say?
They have had, for what it's worth, given it's all different managers, but they've got a good record against Slot's Liverpool.
Yeah. He's never beaten them.
He's not beaten them, including that defeat earlier in the season, and Forest beat Liverpool at Anfield last season. Obviously, this is at home for Forest, but I imagine they must be the only team that Slot's played that many times in the league and not beaten, given how well he did last season.
And for Liverpool, I think it's a match to confirm momentum, because after they lost to Man City, they beat Sunderland away in the Premier League, which was big. They had a really good performance against Brighton in the FA Cup. Salah looks to be back on form. Konate as well. Kirk has played really well at the FA Cup. So they haven't shown a lot of consistency throughout the season. So it's a good chance for them to just keep the momentum.
If they do keep the momentum, could be problems for Forest, who only have 3 points between themselves and the side in 18th spot West Ham. West Ham, who are hosting Bournemouth Saturday tea time. Both these teams are in form. West Ham have taken 10 points from the last 15 available. Bournemouth, though, after their recent wobble, are now unbeaten in 6 and have unearthed another wunderkind in the form of Ryan, Natalie.
Yes.
Did you know about him before?
Yeah, he was an absolute sensation at Vasco at the academy. So he arrived there at the age of 6. His dad was a defender
6?
for his dad was a defender for Vasco. So everyone was talking about him at the academy, and then he makes his debut for the main team when he was 16. It takes him a while to get used to things, and Vasco was going up and down and just in a bad run, changing managers. But last season, when Fernando Diniz decided to make the team about Ryan, then he flew. Ryan, yes. So he became not only the main player at Vasco in a team that had Felipe Coutinho as well. So he was the main player, Ryan, but also one of the main players in the league. Everyone was expecting him to get a big move to a big team, and Fernando Diniz, even the manager, even mentioned that he should wait and maybe get a bigger opportunity. But he really wants to have a long career at European football, and he saw Bournemouth as this big opportunity for him to develop.
Right.
And he's been wonderful.
So this is a player who Bournemouth fans can really get their hopes up about.
I think so, because he's been delivering for a full season in Brazil under a lot of pressure, and he's very talented. He's very skillful. I don't think he's at the level yet of Estevão and Endrick and these other players that he gets compared to, but it will be very interesting to see his development. I think he's a real talent to play for the national side as well. Not now, I think it's too early, but for the cycle after 2026, I think he will be involved. He was already getting a lot of requests from fans to be in the Brazilian national team.
Nice. I'm really excited to see Crescencio Somerville anytime he steps on a football pitch.
He's in great form at the moment. The only thing I was going to say quickly on Ryan or Bournemouth in general is that they've got a really good sales pitch to say, come to us, we will develop you or give you even a short amount of time with Dean Howson, for example, Sabania going to PSG. You can go on to the elite clubs quite quickly if we give you the platform to do it. So I think it might have been fairly easy sales pitch to him.
Yeah,
Plus,
great
it's the
manager.
Brazil of the Premier League, isn't it?
So
Really,
true.
the beach,
That's so true.
The Samba vibes down in
Samba
Bournemouth,
vibes.
yeah.
Yeah.
You must find it very confusing when you go there, Natalie. It must be like you're at home.
It's disturbing, really. Yeah.
Natalie, you're going to Chelsea this weekend.
Yep. With Burnley, it will be interesting to see how they're going to react to the FA Cup shock they had, losing to Mansfield, because they were in a terrible run, and then they go and they beat Crystal Palace, and you think, okay, we can capitalize on that, and then they get knocked off, and then they get knocked out of the FA Cup by Mansfield. It's been terrible for fans, and I don't know where Burnley season can go from now, because at least they had the competitiveness of the FA Cup, because the Premier League seems to be
Do you think 9 points, the gap? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that they're not showing signs of big improvement, or okay, we can fight against that. And from a Chelsea perspective, I think it's really nice to see what's been happening attacking wise, because in the FA Cup, Liam Delap had a really good performance with 3 assists. I don't think it's enough for him to start against Burnley, but maybe it is, and we'll see if he'll choose him to start alongside João Pedro, because João Pedro's been doing so well. And Maresca played João as a 10 with Delap as a striker, but that would mean resting Palmer, which doesn't make sense at the moment. And João really prefers to play as a 9 because he's very aware of the competition for the number 9
For Brazil.
For Brazil, yes, and he talks about it. So he wants to play as a 9, and he's been developing and he's been delivering in that position. So you have a lot of really good choices. I want to know how Rosinha will deal with the rotations between Delap, João, and Estevão, and Palmer, and Pedro Neto, who's been just so good and versatile. So it is interesting, like everything that Chelsea can come up on the final third.
They've only won 2 of their last 6 meetings with Burnley at Stamford Bridge. My mind is blown by that statistic. Aston Villa are taking on Leeds Saturday at 3:00. Only 1 win in their last 4 for Villa. If you weren't keeping track of whether they are good Villa or bad Villa, right now they are bad Villa. Got beaten in the FA Cup by Newcastle. And Leeds are in a terrific run of form, although they've only won once away from home all season, and that was at Wolves. But 2 defeats in the last 13 in the Premier League for Daniel Farke's side.
I mean, only Wolves have a worse away record than Leeds this season. So the omens aren't great on that front. And I think with the Villa loss to Newcastle, there is an asterisk of Marco Bizot just high kicking. As Jacob Murphy, wasn't it? So the game was quite competitive up to that point. So I think Villa are still definitely the favourites in this one. But I imagine Leeds will probably block out the centre of the pitch, stay really compact and force Villa into wide areas, which they don't like to do quite as much. Villa are very good, and Emery really likes his team to play really narrow and have those sort of neat combinations. But Leeds like the physicality, like to stay really sort of strong in the middle. I can imagine that being fairly attritional for long periods.
Sounds fun.
And talking about physicality in the middle, they are settling in with this new midfield with Onana and Douglas Luiz, with all the injuries there. So it is a big factor when they don't have McGinn, when they don't have Kamara, when they don't have Tielemans, but especially talking about physicality, McGinn and Kamara.
Okay. Leeds.
I mean, you mentioned before slightly, obviously the thing of if City win all their games, if Arsenal win their games. I mean, realistically, if Villa won all their games, they would win the league as well. I mean, even though mathematically they would, as in it wouldn't guarantee them, but the way the points are going, I mean, if they put together a 12 game winning run from this point, I don't think Arsenal or City are going to pick up enough.
Who'll take points off each other.
Exactly. But I mean, I should be clear, I've been very clear on this all season. That ain't going to happen. Villa are not going to win the league. But I'm just saying.
Thanks for bringing it to attention.
Yeah.
Okay. Sunday at 2:00. Sunderland taking on Fulham. I would imagine we'd all have Black Cats as strong favourites here, given their strong home form. Fulham as well have had 3 straight defeats in the Premier League. Although Sunderland's form has been impacted, it looks pretty clear, by Granit Xhaka's injury. They've lost 3 of the 4 matches that he's missed so far. Do we know when Xhaka's meant to be back?
I think still another week or so. That was the prognosis last time Adebri spoke about it.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Sunday, 2:00. And we'll, of course, be reporting back Sunday evening when we do our roundup. One game, though, will be happening on Monday, and that is Everton against Man United, who they beat at Old Trafford earlier on this season. But they'll be hosting them at the Hill Dickinson, where their record hasn't been so impressive. We haven't mentioned Brentford-Brighton, which has got lots of backstory to it.
That's the Ben and Bloom beef, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Analytics derby, so I'm already interested.
All over that.
Brighton, who've won just one of their last 13 Premier League matches and will be facing here the long throw threat of Michael Kayode. The Kayode call. He did an interview with The Athletic.
Yes, I don't know when it's coming out, but Kiva O'Neill has done an interview with him, and in preparation for it, we were looking to equip her with some data.
Right.
And throw-ins often do come to mind, which feels like you're maybe doing a player of that quality a bit of a disservice. But when it has been such a key weapon for Brentford, and for those interested, Brentford have got the highest XG from throw-ins within 10 seconds of the throw-in being made, which is what I equipped Kiva with.
Right.
But I think for all
and they're
intents
usually
purposes,
his throw-ins, I feel.
Usually his throw-ins,
Yeah.
but I've heard that he doesn't like to actually talk about them. Yet this video does suggest.
So he put
otherwise.
out a video on this week on Instagram. To be fair, the subject's not really his throw-ins. It's
swimmers. The swimmers.
It's swimmers, yeah. Well, yeah, that does seem to be the metaphor a little bit. What would you call it? A baby announcement?
It's called a gender reveal, even though it's a sex reveal, not a gender reveal.
So it's he and his partner, I'm guessing here, they're in the centre circle at the G-Tech. It's quite a production. The goal has got balloons all the way around it and a variety of fireworks, which when Kayode throws the ball, not that impressively, but he manages to get it into the
XG on
net.
that is low.
Into the net. The fireworks reveal, they go off pink.
Which, again, a lot of people would say is, quite an old-fashioned...
Well, there's nothing wrong
colour,
with
but,
traditions, A lot
But
of
yes,
people
so-
are not oppressed by them.
Yeah.
I would just say, as people are free to follow traditions if they want, just as much as they're free not to. I feel. Yeah.
Congratulations on their...
Yeah. Tim getting the
baby girl.
ball into the net in a real as well as kind of metaphorical sense, if you...
Exactly, yeah. Harry Kane did one of these on the Spurs All or Nothing documentary.
Did he throw the ball into the net?
He didn't throw it. I think he kicked it, and it
Again,
revealed-
quite symbolic.
Yes. Yeah.
Sent the keeper the wrong way as well, I think, at the same time.
Yeah.
What's that?
Imagine if
So
he
that's
missed
no
it.
metaphor.
All right.
Yeah, in their case, I think it was a boy. But yeah, these are huge in the States. And as Natalie said before, they are becoming bigger in this country. And people will have their views on them.
Yeah,
Excellent.
In Brazil, they're big as
It
well.
was very sweet.
Yeah.
It was sweet, no? It took me a while to understand what was going on. But best wishes to him and his partner and the, upcoming, etc. Excellent. All right, I'm just going to mention one thing before everyone can go home, and that is that on the subject of offspring, Thiago Silva's son, Iago Silva, has debuted, or is going to debut, one of them for England's under-15s. Is that right, Natalie?
Yeah, that is right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he did make his debut
He did.
against Cyprus.
Yeah.
That's really nice. So, of course, with the new regulations, that doesn't mean that he's always going to be an England player. But it's interesting that he's turning out for them at this level. And what position does he play? Is he any good?
He's a defender. He can play left back as well, but he's a center back. I know Thiago is very involved with his development, and he really follows. Like he flies to the UK to watch him every now and then, every chance he has, and they just have a really, really strong connection with not only Chelsea but
Right.
But
Is he with the
country.
Chelsea youth team as well?
Yes,
Right.
he is. And Thiago really loves Chelsea. It's it passed on to his kids. So yeah, it's nice. I don't know if it's one of those things, being the son of such a great defender. You have really good examples, but
That it's
challenging.
tough to... Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, challenging.
Like Daniel Maldini and Christian Maldini.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes. That's
I mean,
a good
Daniel's doing
example.
all right, but as a forward, Christian Maldini, after producing that incredible tackle on Seedorf at the age of about 7 months of age, has not had the same kind of career. But then,
Yeah.
who does?
Well, and we were talking about impressive Bournemouth forwards. There's Justin Kluivert, who
Yes.
he's
So
having a
true.
great career.
It's better
true.
to have someone who plays in a different position to their parent, so that there's no comparison.
Yeah.
Thinking like a Tom Ince and Paul Ince.
Yeah.
Poor Jordi Cruyff.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Liam Delap, Rory Delap.
yeah.
I mean, the list goes on. Anyway, that's it for today's Totally Football Show. As mentioned, on Sunday evening, if you fancy, you can find us on our YouTube channel, recording the show for Monday morning, rounding up all of the weekend's action. Be probably around 7:15, 7:30. Otherwise, just hang around and it'll drop into your usual podcast provider on Monday. For now, though, many, many thanks to Charlie, to Mark, to Natalie, and to Jake and producer Charlie in the booth. We'll be back with you soon. Have a great weekend from all of us here. It's goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.